And we are live. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the casual wrap-up video. Last week we hosted a debate on this channel. The premise for the debate was the phrase "the headphone jack should die," and I was really lucky to get both Enobong Etteh from Board at Work and Mr. Ron Richards from All About Android to come and debate the pros and cons of that premise. And so Ron Richards was supporting that premise. He's been outspoken in wanting to support more wireless standards, more USB, not USB, but Bluetooth audio. And Enobong Etteh, if you ever catch a Board at Work video, you'll notice that there's a huge wall of headphones behind Mr. Enobong Etteh. He's a collector of different headphones. So I wanted to take some time to kind of go over the results. Now that there's also been a little time post debate, share some of my own thoughts and definitely share some of my favorite comments from that original video, which I'll have a link. I forgot to put a link down in this video's description, but I'll also throw a little card so that you can click on that directly. And I think I'll also combine these and create one super long audio podcast that people can listen to, hopefully early next week. But I wanted to spend some time chatting through this stuff because it's one of those topics that I think does get people pretty passionate about consumer electronics and something that a lot of consumers will take for granted, but it's still something that there's a little nuance for people who want a higher quality experience for that listening experience. A lot of people are going to be happy with just sort of a standard or a bare minimum experience, that they're not really looking for anything special. So we get into a number of different conversations and we get into a number of different debates or arguments about things like convenience versus quality. What can the human ear actually, hear in terms of nuance and detail? Or, how can we move the industry forward if we're still using legacy ports, legacy adapters? And so throughout the debate, we have about 45 minutes of conversation in that first video, which I was really excited to go back and listen to. But debates are hard. Debates are really tricky, and we did keep a clock on each participant, and there's something psychologically funky which happens, especially if you don't practice your debating skills, where it's not easy. You put someone on a clock and you say, okay, well, sum up your argument and give me the best bullet points that support your argument, and from there you have to, you have to go. It's a crazy position to be under, and I really want to take that extra second to thank both Enobong Etteh and Ron Richards for participating in this format, because you're not really gonna be at your best. Like I said, neither of them are practiced debaters, and so it's a tricky situation to be under. And I thought both participants did a phenomenal job of rising to the occasion. So ultimately, in going back and rewatching the debate, I think one of the things that both participants got a little too hung up on was the idea of this being wired versus wireless. Now, from Ron's perspective, he's been a big proponent of trying to move everyone over into Bluetooth. And so a lot of his arguments were hinged on the convenience of going wireless and trying to get away from cabled connections and those types of situations. Whereas Enobong is a big fan of super high quality headphones and gaming headsets, so he's all about that cabled connection. And I thought both of them missed an opportunity to also discuss some of the merits of maybe moving over to USB-C standards. There were little mentions of that, and there were some questions about that in the audience Q&A, but I don't think either really sort of I don't think either of them really dug into what that could have offered consumers as a potential solution, because there are people like me who I do have a healthy collection of Bluetooth headsets. But when I want a nice listening experience, I want a hard cable connection. I'm not actually super particular about what port I'm plugging into. I just want the non-interrupted audio stream that I can get from a cable plugged into a device. If that cable terminates in USB-C and we can have good solutions for that, then I'd probably be happy too. But let's get down into the vote, because the vote, the vote is, I don't think anyone's going to be surprised by the results on this vote. Let me see if I can actually blow this up a little bit, and I'll go into screen share so that you can see it a little bit easier. I should have prepped this before doing the live broadcast. And I see you guys in the live chat. I'm not ignoring you. It's just there's a lot of information to chew through, and I don't want to just completely ramble off topic. So I'll save I'll save audience questions just for a little bit after we get through the initial batch of comments, and then some of my own thoughts. But here, let me go into screen share, get that, and we can actually see the numbers here. So a proper structured debate, my favorite debates don't only measure winners and losers, but also persuasiveness. So there were 4 options on this debate. Did you, if you can see my mouse cursor right there, did you agree with the premise? And the premise is the headphone jack should die. So did you agree with that statement and still agree with that statement after the debate was finished? 8% of people who watched this video believed that not only believed that the headphone jack should die before they started watching the debate, but they still felt that way after the debate was finished. Now, did Enobong change anyone's mind? Because Enobong was debating against this premise. He was attacking this premise. And 2% of people agreed with the premise, but then after listening to Enobong's arguments, then disagreed with the premise after he was finished. Now, this is the number I don't think anyone was going to be surprised by. 84% of people who voted in this poll disagreed with the premise, disagreed with the statement that the headphone jack should die, and still disagreed after the debate was over. Now, the number I find most surprising, because again, we're talking about the margins. Overwhelmingly, people walked into this debate with an idea in their head that the headphone jack should live, and they still disagreed with that premise after the debate was finished. But this is what I think is really interesting. 4% of people disagreed with this statement to start, but then agreed after the debate was finished. So Enobong got to benefit from an overwhelming majority of people who disagreed with that statement to begin with. But Ron Richards was actually more persuasive throughout the debate with the tiny margins of people who didn't already disagree with the statement before going into the debate. So Enobong handily wins thanks to the momentum of support for the 3.5 millimeter headphone jack. I mean, I don't think anyone would question the results there. Overwhelmingly, people disagreed with the statement the headphone jack should die. But for the people out there who were open to having their minds changed, Ron Richards changed more minds than Enobong did throughout the course of the debate. So I find stuff like that to be very, very interesting. And now my Firefox is wigging out, so I can get rid of that. So that's what I love about a debate is when you structure it properly and you give people the options for discussing those things. And I had a couple comments like, well, why did you title the video with a declarative statement? Why did you title it "The Headphone Jack Should Die"? And you're like, well, I need someone to have an emotional feeling. I think the best debates hinge their debate on a statement. And then you have to decide, as the audience member watching that debate, you have to decide how you feel about that statement in that moment. If you ask a question like, should the headphone jack die? I think it's really easy for a lot of people to shrug and go, no, and then just walk on. But the second you make it a declarative statement, an opinion one way or the other, then people have, a responding emotional reaction to that statement. I know it sounds a little clickbaity, but I think the best debates that I've ever watched online follow that same format too, because they want the audience to really be invested in the discussion more, than they just want to just regurgitate whatever feeling they have off the top of their head and get on with their lives. I think, some great like religion and politics debates sort of follow that same thing because they want people actively engaged and they want people listening. So I can appreciate some of the comments that I got on this video that, I was being maybe a little too clickbaity, but this is an actual debate structure that I wanted to honor and I want to continue. So whenever there are future controversial topics that I want to play with for this type of video structure and getting other guests to come on and debate, especially when I don't have to do the debating, I can put other people on the spot and have them share their opinion. This is something that I want to share. So I got a huge range of comments on this video. Obviously, most people were following the results that we just talked about. Most people disagreed with the premise. Most people disagreed with the idea that the headphone jack should die. So Anthony Robertson provided one longer comment that I'm going to chew through here. Anthony Robertson writes, I disagreed and still disagree. This comes from someone who refuses to use wired headphones. My biggest issue, battery. I have 3 pairs of Jaybird Freedoms because I frequently forget to charge them, but the fact that I can still use them while charging via the power bank connector, then charge that after depletion while listening off the headphone battery gives me the most ease. I have very strenuous travel times as I ride public transportation around his neighborhood. They are pretty expensive and don't have the best Bluetooth connection, often having a second or 2 laps. Thunder Eesh also should have mentioned when they were rebutting that the cost efficiency, cost I don't know if he said efficiency or efficacy is on the side of wired, as it wasn't an extra accessory. Most manufacturers put them in the box. Some Samsung and LG even put higher quality $100 buds in them with their phones, whereas not one company has included wireless earbuds in the box. Not to mention car connectivity. There are more cheaper options to connect phones with 3.5 than Bluetooth. To the tune of ghetto tape decks. Here's a tape with a cord coming out Bluetooth. Get a new audio system. And so there are a number of comments, sort of relating to that notion of simplicity and connectivity and universality. The 3.5 phono jack, the 3.5 millimeter phono jack, is based on a standard that was created in the 1890s. So we understand this connector really well, and especially for mobile and consumer tech, getting out of that era of having different dongles and connectors and adapters where all phones could just have a 3.5 millimeter headphone jack felt like a significant win. That now we're going back into a really stratified era of different adapters and things that we have to mess with. I'm going back and revisiting one of my favorite old Windows phones. Not Windows phones, Windows mobile phones. So this is the HTC Touch Pro. And if you wanted to listen to audio, you had to have a special micro USB adapter, which I've long since lost. And I'm not going to go and try and find another one. So while I'm playing around with this phone, while it's got a lot of really cool and progressive stuff for an old Windows mobile PDA device, I can't listen to audio on it, which is kind of a huge bummer. We got a number of other comments kind of along that same line from Ashley Castle. I have the Razer phone. It has no headphone jack, and the adapter doesn't take much to move and cut the music off. So I have no option but to get wireless headphones. It sucks not having that option. That's another thing too. There were several comments relating to. We even got a really good question about that in the show, about the durability of the USB-C port on the bottom of our devices. Now playing double duty, not just for charging, because charging is often, not always, but often a passive or sedentary experience for a phone. You put it down on a desk, you plug in the cable, you let the battery top off, you kind of maybe play around with the phone or hold the phone, but it's not being jostled or bent or moved around in your pocket like headphones might be, especially if you invest in headphones. I don't think I have some on the table right now, but if you invest in headphones that have angled headphone connectors or right angle, so that the connector isn't just straight out of the phone and getting bent around in your pocket, having a dedicated port just for that audio could be a benefit for some people out there if they're living more active lifestyles. Then we got a couple. So one of the things, I had to mute several commenters on this video because they went out of their way just to say really insulting or hateful things to Ron Richards. That because he was debating a position that they found unpopular or that they did not appreciate, that they went out with personal attacks or called him an idiot or lots of other words that I'm not going to say in a stream where I'm trying to keep this stream PG-13. So first of all, that's not cool. Ron Richards took time out of his day. I think he has earned his reputation in the tech space through decades of online content production. And just because you might not agree with him doesn't mean that you get to attack him personally. But Ron also did get a few things wrong just in his description of how audio systems work. And this is something that I actually went on the All About Android podcast and had to set Jason straight, because Jason would talk about DACs, portable dongles and DACs, as if they were something different than the headphone jacks that get built into our phones. And so Bradley Hove also commented on this. Does this dude not understand when you get rid of the headphone jack, there's going to be a DAC somewhere along the signal path? I mean, do you just listen to digital ones and zeros? And a couple other people also mentioned audio is an analog experience. At some point, it doesn't matter where, but at some point, you need to create vibrations of air that your ears can interact with. And so that's what a DAC is, a digital to analog converter. Unfortunately, and the thing is, when you go back and you listen to the debate, Ron is falling for one of the traps that I think a lot of consumers are going to fall for in conflating the portable dongle or adapter that lives outside of your phone as being something different that's plugged into your phone or built directly into your phone. And we're starting to use that word DAC interchangeably with these other products, these other devices. So this is why it's kind of up to us geeks to make sure that DAC doesn't become just a generic term, that we are pointing to this as a specific part of the hardware. And if we want to use the word like dongle, that makes sense to me. But when DAC becomes interchangeable with dongle, then a lot of consumers are going to misunderstand why one piece might be different than something else. So that to me was kind of one of the trappings that Ron fell into, is that he was using that word in that consumery way where it's interchangeable with, some other solution, and it's not necessarily accurate. But I get what he was saying in that, in having sort of an external audio converting unit, that's what he was trying to bring up, is that, consumers don't want to have these extra dongles. And that's why I think so much of his argument was based on the wireless side of the argument, that the convenience for most people is going to unseat that issue with having an adapter that sticks out the bottom of your charging port. So from Aw Snap wrote this comment: any advancements in wireless or even USB-C digital audio can be done without removing the headphone jack. Everything wireless that can be done on the Pixel can also be done on the Galaxy S8. I can't seem to understand the argument that these wireless future supporters are trying to promote. You can still have a W2 chip, better, higher bandwidth Bluetooth, and or more mature wireless technologies, and still keep the jack. And he goes on to write about, what will sound better. Instead of having one DAC in your phone, the consumer can still have options between the DAC that's built into the phone and things that they purchase on their own. And goes on to write, Apple is the biggest hurdle here. They won't embrace USB-C on their phones, and their wireless technologies will most likely always stay proprietary. So without the 3.5 millimeter headphone jack, it's unlikely we'll have an actual universal solution moving into the future. And that was an argument that several people brought up, which I can definitely appreciate. I like having a standard. And it really seems like the 3.5 millimeter phono jack design is one of the last true actual universal standards. From Boris Boca, perfect example that the headphone jack doesn't really take much space is a phone like the LG V30. Think about that for a second. Apple's influential-ish should die, not the jack. This is another thing, sort of a tangent. When I produced a side video talking about the notch in the screen on the iPhone 10 and how that bugs me on its own. I think the notch is terrible design, but what upsets me even more are the companies that are looking at the iPhone 10 and then thinking, oh, well, if we cut a notch into our phones, it'll be popular too. And that's what's most upsetting, are the number of copycats that sort of jump on the Apple bandwagon. Apple getting rid of the 3.5 millimeter headphone jack on the iPhone falls back on their own proprietary solution, the AirPods, but they also had a vested interest in promoting Beats, so it's like they had an ecosystem ready to go for those consumers who felt like they could just make the move to wireless on a premium phone demanding premium priced accessories. Not everyone gets to make that play, and I think is evidenced. Look at the difficulties that phones like Moto and HTC have been having with their phones that have gotten rid of the headphone jack. It's not like that was some solution to success or making the phone so thin that consumers would like it. That doesn't really seem to have moved the needle much on their market share. Excuse me, I'm kind of sniffly today. So Dave J writes, I've been using Bluetooth headphones with my Moto Z Force and have gone through 11 different headphones from $200 all the way down to $30, and not a single one has been good enough for me to recommend. The constant charging is always an issue. Sound quality is never as good as wired. I end up using standard headphones with the USB-C adapter. If it was possible to get the same sound quality with all day runtime, that would be perfect, but that just isn't possible yet. The other issue I have is the bulk and weight of over the ear wireless headphones. You get longer runtime, but have to deal with most of them feeling off balanced and heavy, distracting from the enjoyment of the music. And this is another thing for me. I do enjoy my collection of Bluetooth headphones. So I have a whole collection of different solutions. Like I've got a couple different pairs of LGs, so these are my Tone Studios. I like these as just sort of a walking around podcasting solution, especially for the speakers that are built into them. I don't have to listen through the earpieces. But this is also actually a pretty decently high quality Bluetooth audio listening experience. And what's hilarious is because of the speaker design, LG does include a 3.5 millimeter input. So let's say your phone doesn't have the best amp. Well, if you plug into something like this, it will power its own amp to make sure you're listening at the proper quality for this input. So not only do these Bluetooth headphones not really get rid of the 3.5 millimeter jack, they have their own input. But then for working out, if I'm outside, I really like bone conduction. But this is never going to be confused with a high quality music listening experience. And for my over the ear solutions, I keep coming back to my old Nokia Monster. So these are made by Monster, but branded by Nokia, Purity Pros. And these are great for sort of airplane rides and listening to movies. Like they're really bassy and thumpy and heavy, and they've got a really wild, like colorful sound profile. But I don't use them for listening to music. And that's where I keep coming back to the difference between soundtracking one experience. Like if I'm working out, I don't care about the highest quality audio. What I want is just sort of like a movie soundtrack playing in the background of whatever task that I'm really focusing on, versus sitting down to really consume music. And I think that's where a lot of people in this debate might not understand the other side. You know, there are a number of people out there who are never going to listen to music as its own experience. They're only really soundtracking other activities. And there are some people who want the full texture and sit down and audiophile and the grade and the nuance. And those are the people maybe who they're really into vinyl. You know, I love vinyl for the texture and the quality, and you drop the needle and you hear the little bit of a scratch and a pop just before the audio kicks in. I think there's something really special about that. And I want to sit down and I want that to be what I'm focusing on. And so once we can kind of untangle that and people aren't butting their heads up against those kinds of ideas, then I think we have an easier time sort of coming to some understanding on why one standard is appropriate for one community and another standard might just be a better fit for another. But, you know, whenever we start dealing with this, there's always the topic brought up that, oh, well, the headphone jack was invented in the 1890s. You know, like we can move on. We can develop something better. And a ton of people jumped on Ron for that. You know, the argument that it's old, so we should get rid of it. This is from Christopher Mawson. He had one of my favorite comments on this. The argument of it's old technology, thus we should get rid of it, is a null argument, being that we still use the wheel. Excuse me. Keeping it as simple as this, the matter is not just removing the headphone jack, but improving the technology. There are far too many factors not yet discussed involved in this that I hope will be a part of the later debate. A cell phone is a mobile computer with a portable battery, wireless network connections, both network and local Wi-Fi, all for portability. A computer at home is forever plugged into the mains, forever wired into the wall, router, internet, and has ports for wires beyond the headphone jack, USB, Thunderbolt, HDMI. Should our accessories to these reflect the respective nature and purpose of our devices? And headphone jack aside, what about USB wired earphones? Is it just the wire that's the issue? This is part makes me question that the debate as the argument is not wireless versus wired, but removing just the audio jack. Can USB, both legacy, micro, and Type-C, hold a candle to the 3.5 millimeter jack? I think the argument for the audio jack's removal can't really come to a conclusion until all of these other factors are considered. And then to follow that up, this is a comment from Yukimi Kazari. Are people forgetting that if you remove the headphone jack, it allows you to pick what DAC you want in your device? If you like quality and it's that important, you can buy a USB or Lightning connector DAC with a 3.5 millimeter jack built into it. I don't want an LG phone just for their DAC. Why should I be limited? For the mass majority of people, you can just use Bluetooth or the adapter that came in the box. But what about if I want to change what I listen to, get a new adapter, or take care of your battery? I think Yukimi's point kind of falls apart a bit there at the end. But this was, and I was kind of hoping, I offered debate prep to both Enobong and Ron, and this is one of the things that I think Ron completely missed out on. This could have been the killer argument to unseat some of the talking points that Enobong was talking about if we get rid of the 3.5 millimeter headphone jack. And my main point in this, because I'm definitely a fan of standardized audio connections, and if we're going to get rid of 3.5, then I think USB-C has the best potential for becoming another true standard for consumers. I don't think this is going to impact the recording space at all, where actually most of my recording headphones have 1/4-inch jacks, not 3.5 millimeter. So who do you want making your audio connector? Who do you want dictating your audio quality? Those are very important questions. Would you prefer a true audio manufacturer building the output into their high quality headphones, knowing that they will perfectly drive whatever audio solution they build that connector into? Or do you want to continue relying on gadget manufacturers, hoping they might include good audio hardware or they might not? If we're looking at consumers spending a lot of money to invest in high quality audio gear, I think we could potentially see the best longevity come from a solution where a company like Sennheiser, Audio Technica, AKG, Sony builds their own tailored DAC directly into the hardware that you're going to buy. So, for example, I have a pair of Sennheiser 599s. I really like these headphones. I wouldn't consider them audiophile grade, but I think they're a great solution at the price point for a nice open ear, open back listening experience. I think this is great. So this terminates in a 3.5 millimeter headphone cable. Right now, there are only really two phones that I like plugging these into. Well, two lines of phones. The Axon 7, which audio quality is just a little bit lower, but the amp will properly drive these headphones. And of course, LG's series of V phones, the V10, V20, V30. If I plug these into those phones, the amp kicks into the high quality, super loud output, and you get both the proper signal, not just the quality 32-bit audio signal, but then the proper amp output to really make these things shine. Listening to MQA files on these headphones with the V30 is a really pleasant experience. But if I go and take these and plug them into anything else, no other phones are properly driving these headphones. And that's kind of a bummer. So to keep these high quality headphones as a long-term investment means that I have very limited selection of phones that I can use these headphones with. Now, let's say we flipped that. Let's say we got away from the 3.5 millimeter headphone jack and Sennheiser had customized their own high quality, high output DAC amp combination and fit that onto the end of this cable. We've seen DACs that barely take up much more room than the USB-C connector that they're attached to. Then it wouldn't matter what phone I move to. My money invested in these will last multiple phones. And as long as that phone, we still have some kind of standard for USB-C, which I think USB-C is going to stick around for a little while, then what I can do is I can plug them directly into a $200 phone, a $400 phone. Maybe I don't want to get another flagship device because I've spent so much money on my headphones. Then it won't matter what device. I am not punished with using an entry-level phone with terrible audio output because Sennheiser delivered exactly what I need to properly drive those headphones. And I know some people can say, well, what about just having Sennheiser make a dongle that can connect and do the same thing? And that could be one solution too. But I want something that I don't have to worry about losing. I don't have to worry about moving. And I want something that can follow me from device to device to device. And that's why I think directly building that into the headphone experience is easier, more convenient, and could potentially give us that perfect 3.5 millimeter jackless world that some people seem to be looking forward to. Because I want to be able to go directly from phone to PC. So many new computers are coming out with USB-C ports, and I want to know that even when I switch that listening experience, it's the big problem with Apple Gear right now. Let's say you get a pair of ear pods in your iPhone, in the box with your iPhone. You can't connect them to anything else. You're done. You have to futz with dongles or mess with adapters. But even if you have that lightning connector terminated pair of ear pods, they don't plug into a MacBook. They will plug into an iPad, but if you have the full Apple ecosystem experience, I don't believe that there are so many Apple fans out there who are like the little girl in that commercial, like, what's a computer? Um, I don't think that demographic really exists. So when you plug your headphones into your iPhone, you have to have a completely separate solution for your MacBook. That's terrible. That's bad ecosystem design. And this is something that Apple should really have addressed by now, even if it's something as goofy as, well, we're going to put a lightning connector input on our MacBooks just so you can still use our headphones. They won't do that. They're not going to. That's clumsy. We would all say that that's terrible too. So when you have USB-C and you have a PC and an Android phone this also worked really well on Windows phones. It's a shame Microsoft left this space. You can go directly. You don't have to worry about unplugging the headphones from an adapter, or you just pull the dongle out, pop it back in. Now, if my audio processing hardware was built by Sony, AKG, Audio-Technica, Sennheiser, traditional recording companies, traditional recording solutions, I would have a lot more faith that my headphones are being much better powered by that company's expertise than the audio chip, the real tech audio that might be built into my laptop or my PC. Even with my external, this is why I have an external recording solution for my PC. I have a Focusrite Scarlett 6i6. I can't rely on the audio ports on my PC. I need something higher quality than that. Excuse me, I'm going to take a quick drink of water here. Woo. So that to me actually could have been one of the killer arguments, because I don't know that Enobong would have had a proper rejoinder to that, a good rebuttal to that. If we're talking about the reliability of a cabled solution with tailored high quality audio components to properly drive what they're connected to, I think I would invest in that for the future. If Sennheiser told me, again, I have a lot of trust in that brand name. I'm kind of a Sennheiser whore, but I have a lot of trust in that brand name, that if they're saying this is the full chain, this is what we believe is going to really drive it, and this is what we believe is going to be the perfect solution, and you can use it anywhere. You can plug it into any PC, any MacBook, any Android phone, and it's going to perform exactly the same. That unseats a number of the arguments that Enobong was trying to make in terms of getting rid of the jack. Because for all of his high quality headphones, almost none of those high quality headphones are going to be properly driven by most of the phones on the market. Only a handful of phones and portable media devices will truly drive those really nice investments in portable audio. Almost everything else just comes down to convenience. And if USB-C is almost as convenient as a 3.5 millimeter headphone jack, then I think we could be happy. So getting on just to the last couple comments, let me get this on. We did have a couple people that were either for removing the jack or had their minds changed. So from New U21, I really enjoyed this, as both had great points. But as a person who went wireless over 4 years ago and would never go back to wired, I have to say, RIP headphone jack. Move on, people. It's 2018. Welcome to wireless. Hell, even Google, after saying never follow Apple, they did on this again. And then he has the little 100 emoticon, so keep it 100, people. And then from Mr. Kyle Ruggles. So there's a comment on the original debate from Kyle Ruggles, which is like 5 pages long. So I cut a lot of that out to talk about it. But one of the main points that Kyle Ruggles makes, Kyle Ruggles is a buddy of mine. He's a great photographer. MP3 at 320 kilobits per second is pretty good, right? So what's the bandwidth limitation of, say, Bluetooth 4? It simply says to me that Bluetooth has more than enough bandwidth for anything audio related. Problem is the threshold and range or signal strength. I'd love high powered short range, like a 10-foot signal at 10 megabit per second. That would be solid. How often do people normally keep their phones compared to the issues they have with connectors? We all could just buy a FiiO X7 Mark II. I actually have my FiiO X5 charging over on the floor right there. It's a badass little media player. It's really super clean. If we want audio, buy something that is dedicated to it. But if all we do is rely on our phones to provide our music, then are we really just limiting ourselves? We're using our phones for convenience. They do everything, but not everything perfectly. So we might as well buy a dedicated player. I didn't agree with the premise, but then after listening to Ron, I agreed. Not that it should die, but it's hard to fight against the tide, especially when the tide wants for something slimmer, more pocketable, sleeker, and all that jazz. Due to both of your sides, not one side over the other, but hearing both of you broadened my perspective. And so we had a lot of people who were also peacekeepers. Richard Ratner, who's been a longtime commenter and a great supporter on my channel. I agree with both sides of the argument. Does that count, Juan? Brilliant format. Love the video. Kind regards from the UK. And then Mark and Catherine Dolliger also said both have equally valid points. I really enjoyed this. Thank you, Juan. But maybe my favorite comment came from a Reddit post. C. Mon, the headphone jack should die. All phones should just come standard with 4-pin balanced XLR, or better yet, 2x3-pin XLR connectors. And for those of you who aren't as hip to the recording world, an XLR connector is about a quarter around. So all of our phones would have to have that docked, and you'll see those on mixers and and like portable recorders and stuff. And so I loved that comment because obviously we just weren't thinking big enough. If we're going to get rid of the tiny 3.5 millimeter headphone jack, we should move up to something proper, y'all. So this is where I come down to. In a perfect world, I think consumer choice would be the deciding factor. And that means giving consumers all the options. It's why a phone like my LG V30 is such a compelling offering, because it's one of the only phones that does have a super high quality DAC and amp combination to not only give you a high quality audio signal, but then to properly drive basically any piece of equipment that you plug into it. If you want, you can connect something to the USB-C port on the bottom. You can go to Bluetooth. You have all of your bases covered in one device, which I don't think anyone would argue is a sleek, small, thin, portable, pocketable phone that we don't see a lot of wasted space, and we don't have to deal with a notch cut out in the screen just for the selfie camera. And it's got a respectably large battery, all with a super large display, that 2:1 aspect ratio screen. This ticks, I think, all of the boxes for someone who's really looking at that high quality listening experience, that high quality audio experience. It's just you have to deal with LG not always being the fastest on software updates, but we're hoping that will change. So convenience becomes a major part of the question, but in light of where the industry is heading, and I really do believe that over the next couple of years, pretty much everyone's going to get rid of the headphone jack because it's too lucrative for companies and selling higher cost, higher margin accessories to go along with them. And then you also have an entrenched community of people who are perfectly happy with years old headphones. I have a pair of these are a pair of monitors. These are HD25s, again from Sennheiser. Like I said, I'm kind of a Sennheiser whore. And every single piece on these headphones have been replaced several times. I think I've had these for almost 15 years. And just minor purchases like new ear cups, a new cable, a new connector right there have kept these things running. It's kind of the old joke. You've got a mop. So you've got a handle and a mop head. And after a couple of years, you replace the mop head. And then after a couple more years, you replace the mop handle. Do you still have the same mop? Well, no, but you didn't have to rebuy your mop all at once. I haven't had to rebuy my headphones all at once for 15 years. But if you get rid of the 3.5 millimeter headphone jack on a phone, it would force me, if these were my main listening headphones, that would have forced me to purchase an adapter, some kind of dongle, or some kind of wireless solution, or rebuy all new headphones just so that I could have a wireless listening experience. And I think that's what's bugging a lot of people out there. So looking at that as an industry trend where companies are kind of forcing our hand with these legacy connectors, these actual universal connectors, what I hope to see is more pressure being put on audio manufacturers. I think the perfect solution for USB-C for consumer grade and audiophile grade hardware is to get after recording companies to deliver their own DACs. I still don't see why they couldn't have gotten ahead of the curve there. I know, Lightning connector might be the easier way to kind of get into that space because you have a consistency of design approach for the iPhone that is going to make it really easy to put out just a couple audio solutions that all iOS users can adopt. But I think USB-C has hit that tipping point where most consumers would be able to play ball with that. And you would also be able to make the good faith argument that, like, say you had just like sort of a mid-ranger, like, this is a Moto G5. It's got a headphone jack. It's not a particularly great headphone jack, but you could plug something into the USB port. This is micro USB, so this isn't maybe the best example, but you could plug something into that headphone jack and then know that you're going to be getting a really high quality listening experience. So even for phones that have a headphone jack built in, we know not all headphone jacks are created equal. So I had a lot of fun putting this debate together. I think the results were very much in line with what I was expecting. Definitely that most people would be disagreeing with the premise, that I would be getting a lot of thumbs down just from idiots that didn't really watch the video, just saw the comment, the title of the video, and then decided to have an opinion but not actually engage in the discussion. The Reddit post. So if you go to our headphones on Reddit, and you see the post that I submitted for that, it got downvoted into oblivion. And again, it wasn't about, because the whole thing about a Reddit community is that you should be downvoting if you disagree with like the actual content, but most people just said the title and went, nope. And so like you have to go to controversial in our headphones even just to see it. No one was really entertained in engaging with an actual discussion. It was just the knee-jerk reaction of seeing that title, which I thought was hilarious. So I was very surprised to see that more people seem to be persuaded by Ron than by Enobong. But again, I think this is also kind of going to some of the changing opinions and where wireless is at. Bluetooth has gotten better. I don't think it's anywhere near ready to replace mainline, dedicated, consistent cabled listening solutions. And I still think we need another year or two yet just to see what the durability impact might be on USB-C connectors before we can really jump whole hog into completely eliminating a universal standard like the headphone jack. But I think we're pretty close. I don't think we're that far away. So if there's anything that you guys want to throw out there for questions, just let me get my live chat back up because I've seen a ton from Yukumi Kazari, which also thank you for your comment, Yukimi. I know Reddit is cancer. And then from Abraham Motion right after, LOL, Reddit sucks. And Andrew Wallace immediately fat produce. Our glowing rectangles isn't cancer, my good sir. Our glowing rectangles is an initiative we're trying to start to help smaller YouTubers find ways to kind of build up their views and to build up their subscribers through self-promotion. Because a lot of subreddits frown on you promoting your own content. And I wanted there to be a place where people could at least start getting the ball rolling on building their Reddit cred, their karma cred, and then all those other situations. And now there's like a huge piece of machinery doing landscaping right outside my window. What about the Y adapter that would allow charging and 3.5 millimeter usage at the same time? Why aren't those a thing? So this is from Jonkki, Jonkki. So there are a couple. It's one, I think power management becomes a problem. I would be willing to hypothesize that anything that's allowing for power management in a way that can fast charge a cell phone could potentially act as a disruptor for audio. There's a reason why we kind of keep those components separate. HTC made a brilliant move with the 1M7 in pulling its audio hardware directly off of the PCB, the logic board of the phone, in a way to help minimize interference from the rest of the electromagnetic noise that's generated on the inside of the phone. And a number of companies have pulled very similar maneuvers in trying to isolate the audio hardware. I believe, I don't know that this is true, and someone will probably tell me that I'm totally wrong, but I would guess that it's easier to properly separate those components on the inside of the phone than trying to deliver that on a dongle, which we probably won't have the same consistency, the same QA in manufacturing, those kinds of accessories. Uh, and that those Y adapters have to be super durable. You know, as you move around, the wear and tear on those will probably start to degrade the shielding that would isolate the jack and the DAC from the power management, the power cabling. That would be my guess. And someone please tell me if I'm totally wrong there. Let's see. From Aaron Stanley, how would you feel about a phone with two USB-C Type-C jacks? I would like it. I just don't know that any manufacturer is really going to go out of their way to deliver something like that as a mainstream consumer product. And I think I would be worried that consumers would look at that and question why they need it. And then, because again, we're in an era right now where consumers don't really want new. They kind of want the same thing that they've always had, just with minor refreshes to make it feel new. And I think if you were to disrupt, you know, why do I have two of these ports when you could have just given me a headphone jack? I think is what a lot of people would say to that. I think overcoming the negative sentiment on something like that is a really difficult uphill battle that would take years of reinforcing before people would jump on board. And I think if you were to do that over a period of like 3 years, I think most consumers by that point will likely have gone to some kind of low cost Bluetooth solution. So I just don't see it as being very likely. I think it's something that would be super popular with a small handful of very passionate tech fans, not only just for audio, but for all of the other benefits that extra connectivity would have. I would love to have, you know, I don't know if you guys have ever seen when I do my videos about like Mojo, mobile journalism, mobile production. I always love to show my setup with a phone and a stylus and a Bluetooth keyboard and a USB to full size USB adapter connected to like a flash drive or a hard drive, just because I will legitimately work my phone like a laptop when I have the opportunity to. I am nowhere near being normal for that kind of usage. Let's see. Fast charging takes a bigger power bandwidth. That comes from Sherrill. Mario Gonzalez, I still want the headphone jack. Let's see. Okay, so from Sharil Rahman, sorry if I just butchered your name. Repeating this question, how much power does Bluetooth connection take when compared using a high-end headset? Anyone has a head up? Anyone have a heads up on that? So I actually don't know. In doing sort of comparisons in battery life comparisons between like my V30 and my FIO, my portable standalone media player, which I absolutely love. Um, you get a ridiculous amount of listening time using something like the high quality DAC and amp built into the phone. I would imagine that using that separate hardware, not the chipset DAC, but the standalone ESS DAC that's in the V30, probably reduces your battery life over using the built-in Qualcomm DAC. But I can't say to how much or to what degree. And the amp output also probably has a scientifically noticeable impact on battery life. Bluetooth has gotten to a pretty decent low power connection standard, where if we were comparing the power output of a standalone high quality DAC amp combo in a phone versus Bluetooth, I'd be willing to hypothesize that Bluetooth would probably win, but by a scientifically measurable difference. So in real world conditions, you're using your phone for a bunch of different things. The cell phone radio is on, which is still one of the biggest power draws. The screen is still one of the biggest power draws. That the differences between Bluetooth, low power Bluetooth, and a built-in DAC amp combo would be only noticeable in very scientific measurements. Again, if anyone has better data on that, please drop me a comment on this video so that we can look at those results a little bit better. Let's see. Having two USB-C ports kind of removes the argument of ditching the 3.5 millimeter port in the first place. I agree with that, because why have two separate ports if one of them is mostly going to be focused on audio? Though you can make the argument that they could be connected to other things. From Renato Laporte, in theory, you can have fast charging via PD and data transfer, be that a digital audio stream or just USB data, but most phones aren't PD compliant. That's a good point too, is a lot of these techie solutions aren't necessarily reaching the same kind of universal standard. Again, same thing, like you can have a USB-C connector on a product and you don't know if that USB-C connector is micro USB compliant to USB 2, if it's USB 3.0, USB 3.1, or if it's a Thunderbolt port. So even there, we've got a lot of confusion in the marketplace for what's going to be compatible and what's going to be accepted. Let's see. From Altheus, how much power high-end headphones use depend a lot on volume, and that again that comes down to the amp. If you're properly driving from the amp is going to take more juice. From Dark Angel Raphael, but without headphone jacks, how will I listen to my Sony Walkman mini disc player? I'm sorry. I'm so happy I jumped over mini disc. I wanted one so bad. There's that one scene, and it's totally a useless throwaway in Last Action Hero, where he's like listening to AC/DC and he tosses his mini disc player into the seat next to him because he's so cool and high tech. Yeah. I just that cracks me up. It totally like by the time I could have saved up the funds for buying a mini disc player, we had already started moving into the MP3 revolution, which is hilarious. So from Renato Laporte, following up on power delivery. Power delivery is a spec. It is supposed to be a standard. If I want to charge my Mate 10 and listen to music at the same time, it will charge super slow because the Mate 10 isn't PD compliant, which is a good point. From Maxwell Walt, Xperia XZ2 just joined the race with no headphone jack. A lot of people complaining about Sony design. They're finally moving to a taller aspect ratio display, but they're sacrificing the 3.5 millimeter headphone jack. To be fair, the last two generations of Sony phones, not super great when it came to the headphone jack. I don't know about the XZ Premium, if they built better hardware into that, but my beloved XZ1 Compact and the regular XZ1, kind of mediocre, not the best, especially when you compare it to the price of like an Axon 7, which just that amp just blows the doors off of almost every other phone out there. Let's see. I've got a couple other here. I'm just mini disc master race for life. That's so funny, Raphael. Let's see. Until next 8 to 10. I'm reading through the live chat. You guys are definitely hitting me with some great comments here. Let's see. From Shara Abdurrahman Rahman, lies. The biggest power draw on your phone is the Facebook app, which is hilarious. And from Mario Gonzalez, maybe Juan should just get a Gemini PDA. It's designed to do pretty much everything described by default. It's basically a tiny laptop. I actually really want to play with one of those. I'm so interested in what manufacturers might be able to do with like Windows on ARM, Windows on these sort of low power portable chipsets. And if we can really make that push happen, I think that could be disruptive to a lot of this ultra portable market. And it's just trying to get us to a point where that makes sense. And if Microsoft can pull their heads out of their respective butts and work with good, always connected LTE devices, we can end run around where Windows Phone 10 was going with just Windows 10. That could be really interesting. It's likely going to be terrible when someone tries to do it for the first time, but it could have potential for being a way to kind of wedge in between iOS and Android. From Adita and Nil, I'm sorry if I just said that wrong. Is it possible to fit a DAC into a case, might be thicker, but can be manufactured by a known brand and sold at a decent price? Case could connect via Type-C and have a charging port and a jack. So that's totally possible. There are a ton of solutions out there. One of the ones that I started with, again, I'm kind of plugging FIO a lot here, but this is just like a little FIO DAC. And so it's got a micro USB on one side and a 3.5 millimeter jack on the other. It no longer has great compatibility with phones, but I mean, it was designed to be used with laptops. So this would replace the audio output on your laptop as a way to just, portably plug this in and know that you were going to get a really high quality headphone signal. What's funny is that as phones have improved, even phones like a Galaxy S8 can pretty much compete with what this dedicated piece can do. And a lot of laptop headphone jacks and ports have actually gotten a lot better, but they won't compare or unseat like a really good dedicated portable music player or a phone like the LG V30. Let's see. From Jonky again. Do you think Samsung is in the mindset that it's in their best interest to stick to their guns and keep the headphone jack, even or especially they are the last one to do so? I think Samsung will be one of the last holdouts. I think Samsung and LG will probably go down fighting with trying to maintain the high quality moniker. Why I think Samsung should have a vested interest in maintaining this connector for at least another, if not 2 to 3 phone generations, is their recent acquisition of Harman. The AKG brand is now under Samsung purview, and I think they've spent so much money on acquiring that company and the umbrella of those companies that all live under the Harman and AKG labels, that they can capitalize on that with their own series of accessories. It makes me a little bit sad that Samsung now owns the AKG label, because we've seen they're pretty cavalier about just slapping this AKG label on their own earbuds. So these are Samsung headphones. They're very nice headphones. These are some of the best headphones I've ever listened to included in the box with a phone, but they're not AKG headphones. They're plastic and they're plasticky. So while the sound quality is high, I've already had one pair of these fail. So the microphone no longer works on one of the pairs. The pair of headphones that I got with the S8. So those were from the Note 8, and I've had to switch over to those because the S8 microphone is already burned out. That is not an AKG product. AKG makes some of my all-time favorite recording solutions. They make my all-time favorite high-quality studio-grade microphone, the C414. That thing is $1,000 beast of flexibility and reference-grade audio capture. If you want to mic the nuances of grand pianos, that is the mic I would turn to. That's what those 3 letters mean to me, is a lineage, a history, almost a century of audio manufacturing and recording prowess, not something that you cavalierly slap on the side of a pair of almost disposable headphones. Even if they're pretty good earbuds, those are not AKG products. And it bothers me that Samsung is going to play with the label like that. So I think Samsung is going to stick with it, though, because they've invested so much money in that. I think LG will also stick with it for a while, just because it's a differentiator. It makes me crazy that they won't advertise this, but it's rare that you find an objective best feature on a phone. You can't objectively say the Pixel camera is the best or the iPhone camera is the best. It comes down to too many subjective criteria. What you like and what you don't like plays a huge factor in whether or not you're going to get good results out of a camera. And so I'm really handy at shooting with the V30, and I can much better dial in and to get exactly what I want from a V30 camera than I can from a Pixel camera. But I will admit that the Pixel camera has way better HDR and auto processing modes. But that's not how I shoot. So it's not really a big benefit to me. And trying to use any of the manual controls, manual options on a Pixel is super painful. And I hate it. So for that same reason, I think LG will probably stick with this for at least another generation or 2, because they can point to the ESS DAC in the V series phones as being objectively the best. There is no argument there for both the quality and the power of the output. There is no one who compares to LG in that arena. It just, again, it drives me nuts that we haven't seen them actually make a commercial about that. That's silly. Why not advertise that you have something like that? So let me see. The Gemini PDA is actually Android Linux. No, I know what the the Gemini PDA is, Mario. But what I'm saying is, from the future of hardware right now, moving from the Qualcomm 845 on, is that we should see a huge disruption in portable hardware and portable electronics. And so the Gemini, I think, is an interesting solution for that. But think about all of the products in the different Venn diagram circles that step on that. Chromebook is going to have difficulty in that space. Android, you can make an argument for how Android can unseat Windows, and now Windows is also getting into that space. And that's why I want to see that competition be as fierce as it is in that category, because we'll be seeing better choices for consumers. I mean, just think about where we were with Atom processors on Windows 8. That was miserable. But we tried to make that a tablet solution. It just didn't work. Now we can make that work with a proper build of Windows 10 versus Android versus iOS versus Chrome OS. That's a good market for a consumer to walk into. It's a confusing market, but it's a good market for that kind of choice. Let me see. We've seen iPhone 7 cases with the headphone jack, thus a DAC, battery, and storage, all in a case that's not too thick. That's from Renato Laporte. And again, I would be curious to see, because you have all of that built into a hard case which connects to the phone, if that's easier to isolate the different pieces of electromagnetic noise, power management, and audio capture all around on that subject. You know, if you can do that in a hard case which connects to the back of the phone, I still think that that's a better solution than floppy dongles like a Y adapter, which might degrade quickly over time with regular use and abuse. Lifestyle abuse for our electronics is going to be a big deal. Our really expensive phones have gotten super fragile, and the accessories too don't seem to really handle much abuse. I mean, this is the headphone dongle for the Mate 10, and it's just as flimsy and disposable feeling as the headphone dongle for the iPhone. I like Apple cabling. I know it's supposed to degrade better when it's in a landfill, but I would prefer, instead of making products that are designed to rot faster when you throw them away, that we get to a point where we're not throwing these things away. How about we build them better so that we don't need to replace them as often and they don't end up in landfills as often? And I think if you can make a super high quality DAC in just this USB connector, and you had it on a really thick, heavy gauged, heavy shielded cable, properly woven into the experience directly into those headphones, then fewer of these would get lost and thrown away, or just start shredding, because the cabling here is like the bare minimum for like a charge cable, which is kind of sad. Like, you want, for audio, you want something that's a little bit better shielded, not so floppy and wobbly and stuff. Look at how flaccid this thing is. I mean, come on, that's just no fun at all. I mean, so this is like the USB cable that I use with my Fio. And like, it's it retains its shape. I mean, there's metal filament, you know, in this cable to transmit the zeros and ones along from the port, and you know, it's almost a stick. This cable is 2 years old, and I've used it a lot to connect to my little Fio and use it with my laptop. And it's still rugged, rigid. There's no shredding on the nylon weave. This thing is super durable. And I think it cost me like $2. Go to Monoprice. I mean, they've got some great deals on cables. Never buy full price, you know, manufacturer labeled cables when it comes to things like USB-C. Mm-hmm. Rob Schoenfield, anyone remember the HTC Diamond devices that only had a mini USB port? Everybody lost their minds at that time because of the included dongles. The HTC Diamond is an offshoot of the Touch Pro. So the phone that I'm going back, this is the keyboard version of the Diamond. And yeah, it drives me nuts not having a proper headphone adapter. From Leon B, totally agree. That's why I find DxO overrated and useless. I've gotten into this one a lot. People love to throw DxO scores at me when we're talking about cameras. And anyone who throws a DxO score at me is almost always completely and totally objectively wrong in what they're trying to argue. I find DxO scores to be very helpful. I think they are entirely internally consistent with how they measure and rank the devices that they review. The final score at the end is the major problem. You cannot sum up the camera experience under one number. You know, it's a 98. It's a great tune and it's easy to dance to. Like you if you go through a DxO review and you go point by point on what scores higher and what scores lower, I think they are very helpful for the conversation. Unfortunately, fanboy nerds with little fanboy nerd hard-ons for the products that they've already bought, not looking to really educate themselves, but just playing fanboy for the things that they're already a fan of, will look at that one score and use that as some sort of gotcha overall. Well, DxO gave it in 93, so you're obviously wrong. Not looking at what it is that I'm trying to add to the conversation and trying to look at different usage scenarios and not looking at what DxO ranked higher and lower. I think the perfect example of this was last year, the Pixel 1. Not last year, 2 years ago, 2016. I keep me like, you know, the Pixel 2 didn't come out that, you know, it came out pretty recently, but you know, it was still a 2017 phone. So when you look at the when you look at the Pixel 1, it got the highest ranking that DxO had ever given a phone, but for me, that phone had terrible lens performance. So one of the most critical factors of having a nice camera is how good the lens is. And the Pixel 1's lens was awful. I mean, it was just really bad. It was some of the worst flaring I'd ever seen on any camera system, mobile or otherwise. So, how could I, in good faith, give that a good review or a better review just because it makes what the pretty colors in the HDRs? That's bullpucky. I almost like swore really bad. That's not good. But yeah, you've got really pretty HDR color processing. That doesn't, for me, make up the deficit of having a fundamentally flawed piece of hardware. And I got savaged for that. Most people said I was dumb. So let's see. I've got to let me see if I can take at least just another good question here. Um, from Sharil, again, another point why many are supporting killing off the jack. Is it because the just good enough audio users are satisfied with convenience rather than quality? I don't want to make it so reductive, but I do believe there's a kernel of truth in that sentiment where our smartphones have essentially become good enough machines. We've all sort of agreed on a general form factor, design, shape. They're all just regular glowing rectangles. The big advancement has been moving from 16:9 aspect ratios to 2:1 or even wider, like, you know, Samsung's 18.5:9 aspect ratio. We haven't really fundamentally addressed the core usage and the core social problems with using a smartphone. They're all generally just sort of in the same, and we expect some minor spec bumps and some minor improvements, maybe a little bit more RAM, maybe more storage, but the fundamental aspect of glowing rectangle that blocks you from the rest of the world and demands almost all of your senses to operate properly hasn't really been addressed. It's still the same basic philosophy and the same basic experience we've had since the iPhone originally launched. We don't see any more experience. We don't see any more crazy designs. It's refreshing when a company like BlackBerry comes back out with a hardware keyboard, just so we have some real choice in the market for how we operate these gadgets. Getting back to your question about audio quality being good enough, again, it comes down to that major difference. I think there is a tiny minority of people who care about listening to music as an experience all on its own. And I think there's a vast majority of users who use music as sort of a background constant fog to help make other tasks more manageable. And if the main usage for audio is soundtracking another activity, then I don't think it really matters. You know, $50 pair of earbuds, the earbuds that came in the box. Look at how many people still walk around with Apple style earpods. I have an interview lined up with a hearing specialist, an ENT at UCLA doing research on hearing loss. And one of my theories that my hypothesis, not a theory, that I want to present to them is that some of this hearing degradation is because of that earpod style design, not providing proper isolation for the ear and forcing people to listen to their music louder than they probably should. And so I'll be curious to see whether or not my hypothesis holds water or if these trends don't seem to really line up with particular products. But we've got a huge amount of data on people who listen to music on iPhones and only use the ear pods that came in the box. So Oh, Altheus actually has some really cool comments. Not Altheus, Atheus, Atheaeus. You pulled up some specs on Bluetooth 5 power usage and then the draw that you would need to do that. If you wouldn't mind when this video goes offline, if you could share that in a proper comment, I'll try and pin it because I think that's a pretty cool piece of information there. And then let's see. MKBHD talking about DxO scores. I don't think so. This is from Adita Anil. MKBHD did a video on how DxO scores can be manipulated. Their criteria is openly listed to the public. Again, I don't think that DxO is manipulating their scores. I don't think that they are actively participating in campaigns like payola style, where they are listing cameras as the best and then not properly disclosing their testing methods or gaming their testing methods to benefit one company over another. I just think too many consumers look at the final score and don't weigh the pros and cons from the rest of their testing procedure. From Arrow as Bow. I'm so terrible at these. I apologize. You know, you guys have your YouTube names and stuff like that. Would the S9 improve the headphone jack? That's the question. I'll be curious to see because I don't really feel like they need to improve a lot. Qualcomm built in better support for 32-bit audio. So the quality between a Galaxy S8 or a Galaxy Note 8 and the V30 has now gotten closer. The V30 still delivers better quality, less distortion, a better signal to noise ratio with a lower noise floor. But the Galaxy phones have caught up significantly for quality. It's whether or not Samsung will include a better amp. And that to me becomes the big factor there. If they include a better amp and they can properly drive nicer headphones, say really nice mixing grade monitor style headphones from a company like, I don't know, like AKG, then I think we'll see something really special from Samsung. For a lot of consumers, I think the amp is more important than I think the amp is more important now than necessarily the audio quality. As long as you pay Qualcomm the licensing for using their high quality output, you'll get 32-bit playback. You'll get really reasonably high audio quality. But getting that quality out and into a pair of headphones requires also a clean, low noise, high output amp. And that's what I think is screwing up a lot of phones. So, folks, I think we should wrap this up. I have been talking for a really long time, but I'm really glad that you guys went with me on this experiment and that we had a little fun in this discussion, minus a few people that I had to mute permanently from my channel who were just being dicks about insulting people. This is something I definitely want to do more of, and not just with audio, with like geek hardware, but also other geek topics. Like if there are showdowns between, comics or movies and adaptations or pop culture or things that you would like to have a proper debate on, I hope you'll leave me some comments down below this video. I know I've seen some amazing discussion in the live chat, and I think it's one of the saddest aspects of the way that YouTube does their live commentary is this won't get saved. Like I really wish that this would just live on in its own little separate comment thread that people could interact with after the video gets republished as a standalone video. But then, like I said, if you want this to be something to engage with, not only sharing this recap video, but definitely sharing the actual the actual debate that we produced last week. Also, giving a little thumbs up, give a shout out. Go hit up Enobong Etteh. He's at Bored at Work on Twitter. You can hit up Ron Richards. He's at RonXO on Twitter, and just tell him that you enjoyed their discussion. I think that would mean a lot to the participants here, knowing that whether or not you agreed or disagreed, that the civility of this kind of conversation is a way that we can use this platform to help discuss things that are normally just arguments. That's what I love about a proper debate is it takes the loudness out of the discussion. Like you can't just talk over your opponent. Too many arguments today are won just because someone just keeps interrupting, and that's kind of like cable news, just talking heads yelling at each other until someone stops for air and they're the person who lost. That's not a way for us to untangle some of these discussion topics and some of these arguments. We need a real structured debate. So that's what I want to do with the Geek debate, and I want to do more of these moving forward. And I've got a list of really amazing tech commentators, reporters, journalists, and pundits reviewers all ready to jump onto this. So I hope I get some great topic ideas from you guys out there. And of course, I should also mention supporting this channel, sharing this content. We all know that YouTube is not promoting mid-level producers like they used to. I am not search qualified for YouTube, and I think it shows on some of the videos that I produce that just never get seen by the people who have subscribed to my channel. So without your support, without sharing these discussions and without joining these discussions, these videos technically don't exist. So I hope that we can also help change that aspect of YouTube production as well, working together on making sure that these types of videos get a little bit more play, get a little bit more discussion, and are seen by more people by sharing on platforms outside of YouTube, Reddit, Facebook, Twitter. Even if you're on the Google Pluses still, I'm still technically on Google Plus too. So I appreciate you all. Thank you so much for joining the conversation. And if you want to directly support production like this, please consider checking out my Patreon campaign, patreon.com/SomeGadgetGuy. That's going to be the future home for the revived podcast. So when this audio gets cut up and becomes its own standalone podcast, it's going to live on that Patreon feed first. And I'm likely going to be doing my in-depth camera and audio review content as Patreon exclusive content. So that's where I know there are a number of different solutions. This is not a decision I'm taking lightly, but general reviews will always be public, will always be freely accessible. But when I get down into the nitty gritty of stuff, there is a core group of people that are directly supporting my production, and I need to value that audience too. And that's one of the solutions that I'm coming up with. So I hope you'll check it out. I think we've got some fun perks. Even at a certain tier, you get a copy of my book, Take Better Photos, Smartphone Photography for Noobs, available on Amazon Kindle. And it's a way that I can gauge exactly who is supporting the channel and who I should be producing content for. In this age of YouTube kind of stomping all over smaller and medium tier producers, this is one solution we have where we can join the conversation and create another community over there. So I thank you all again for watching. I hope you'll check out future videos of mine and leave me some suggestions for future debate topics. You know where you can find me around the web. You can leave me comments here, or you can catch me on the Facebooks, the Twitters, the Instagrams at SomeGadgetGuy. And I will catch you on the next video.